Welcome to the Remedify Coaching Program podcast. Today we're going to be diving deep into something pretty big, pretty fundamental. Was Jesus more than just a great man? You gave us some really interesting stuff to work with here, and we're excited to, really get into it with you.
Absolutely, yeah. It seems like all the resources you shared really hone in on those unique claims, those characteristics that are all centered on Jesus Christ. What I find super interesting is how they encourage us, to examine these claims factually,
Yeah.
almost like we're comparing them side by side with other religious founders
Right.
to see if there's a strong argument to be made to say that Jesus really was distinct.
Yeah, exactly. So in this deep dive, we really want to break down those core arguments inside your sources, highlight the specific ways Jesus is portrayed as different, and then ultimately kind of invite you to think about what those distinctions really mean. What's the significance of it all?
Yeah.
So let's jump right in, shall we? One of the first things that really jumps out from your sources is how Jesus' arrival wasn't just some random event in time, it was something that was anticipated.
Yeah, it is fascinating how this idea of foretelling is brought up right from the start.
Right.
The sources point to Matthew 1:22-23. All this was done that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the Lord through the prophet, saying, Behold, the virgin shall be with child and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which is translated God with us. This immediately places Jesus within this larger narrative, one that spans history and prophecy.
You're right. And the role of prophecy here is so central, right? It suggests a plan that's been in motion throughout history, pointing toward Jesus long before he was even born. It's not just about looking back at a great figure, it's about seeing him as the fulfillment of something that was predicted.
Exactly. And thinking bigger picture, the sources go on to claim that Jesus actually fulfilled over 300 specific prophecies. That's a bold statement, to put it mildly.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, what are the odds, really, of any single person fulfilling so many predictions, many of them very precise?
It does. And the material doesn't shy away from making a strong statement about this,
Yeah.
claiming that this makes Jesus one of a kind in all of history, even in literature. They go so far as to say, indeed, history is his story, which really emphasizes how significant this claim really is.
It really does. And that raises such a crucial point for us to consider.
Yeah.
If we can back up the fulfillment of these prophecies through historical and textual analysis, what does that tell us about who Jesus was and what his purpose was?
Yeah.
It definitely sets him apart from other influential figures who, they may have had profound teachings, but they don't have this kind of extensive prophetic record pointing directly to them.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then your sources bring up another really fascinating distinction. The idea that Jesus is unique in that he came from outside of this world. This is something that really forces us to rethink his origins compared to other messengers or teachers.
Yeah, it's a key difference for sure. The sources point out that while a lot of religious figures claim to have received revelations or messages, deep insights, what Jesus claimed goes way beyond that. We see this very clearly in John 6:38, where Jesus says, For I have come down from heaven, not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me.
And that context is crucial, isn't it? It's not just about having some special understanding. It's about claiming to have a divine origin.
Right.
And to be on a specific mission from beyond our earthly realm.
Exactly. And the passage even continues in John 6:39-40. This is the will of the Father who sent me, that of all he has given me I should lose nothing, but should raise it up at the last day. And this is the will of him who sent me, that everyone who sees the Son and believes in him may have everlasting life, and I will raise him up at the last day. What stands out to me here is that stated purpose. He's not just here to teach or guide. He's offering something far greater. Resurrection and everlasting life, all rooted in the will of the Father who sent him. I mean, the implications of this origin, this claimed origin, are huge.
Absolutely. And building on this foundation of a unique origin, your sources go on to emphasize that only Jesus explicitly declared himself to be God. This is probably one of the most central and controversial aspects of his identity.
It is, and the sources make a really interesting connection here. It's not just about a verbal claim.
Yeah.
They argue that it was consistently backed up by how he lived, by his wisdom, his natural authority, his humility, and his deep love for others. It wasn't just talk, it was a life that demonstrated it.
We even have a direct, and I'd say pretty powerful statement in John 8:58. Jesus answered, I tell you the truth, before Abraham was even born, I am. And the immediate reaction in John 8:59, where they picked up stones to try and stone him, that speaks volumes about how seriously they took that statement.
It does, yes. That reaction is really telling. The phrase, I am, Directly echoes the name God uses for himself in the Old Testament. So when Jesus used that phrase like that, it would have been crystal clear to his Jewish audience that he was claiming to be divine, and their response shows us just how huge of a claim that was. Now, here's where things get really interesting as we consider the implications of this.
They do. And another remarkable claim that your sources point to is that only Jesus lived a life completely without sin, without any flaw of character. That's a pretty bold thing to say about anyone.
It is. And it's actually directly supported by the challenge that Jesus himself made in John 8:46. Which of you can truthfully accuse me of sin? And since I am telling you the truth, why don't you believe me? It's like he's putting it out there, opening himself up to scrutiny, challenging anyone who might doubt his integrity.
And the next verse, John 8:47, adds another layer to this. Anyone who belongs to God listens gladly to the words of God, but you don't listen because you don't belong to God. This really ties in the idea of recognizing truth with one's spiritual state.
Yeah. This claim of a sinless life is quite unlike anything we see with other great leaders or thinkers. It's not about striving for goodness or admitting flaws. It's saying that he was fundamentally and completely without moral fault. What strikes you about this particular claim?
What gets me is the pure confidence, the authority with which he says it. To stand there in front of everyone and ask if anyone can find him guilty of sin, it's either a sign of serious delusion or a testament to some incredible level of integrity.
Absolutely. And the sources go on to say that only Jesus willingly died for the sins of the world. This introduces the concept of sin not just as doing wrong to others, but as a deep rebellion against God.
Right, and the comparison they make with the deaths of other historical figures is really stark. They say very simply that other men died, and their tombs remain as proof.
Yeah, and the implication there is that Jesus' death had a completely different purpose, a different outcome. They highlight the idea that Jesus came into this world specifically to give his life. They reference Mark 10:45. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many. This points to an act that was deliberate, sacrificial.
And it wasn't just any death, was it? Your sources highlight the fact that Jesus actually predicted his own death in detail long before it happened.
Yeah, that's a key element that adds a lot of weight to the story. Luke 18:31-34 records Jesus saying to his disciples, "Listen, we're going up to Jerusalem, where all the predictions of the prophets concerning the Son of Man will come true. He will be handed over to the Romans, and he will be mocked, treated shamefully, and spit upon. They will flog him with a whip and kill him, but on the third day he will rise again." He didn't just say he would die. He laid out exactly how it would happen and what the result would be.
What's also interesting is that the passage mentions how clueless the disciples were at the time. It says, but they didn't understand any of this. The significance of his words was hidden from them, and they failed to grasp what he was talking about. That little detail really reinforces how accurate the prediction itself was.
It does. I mean, them not understanding at the time actually makes the prediction even stronger. It shows that the story wasn't embellished later on by people trying to make things up. And then when we look at what actually happened, the accuracy of that prediction is powerful evidence.
And this brings us to what is, for many, the most important part of the whole story. The claim that only Jesus rose from the dead, just as he said he would. This is the thing that sets him apart from every other religious leader throughout history.
It is. The sources state very plainly that the tomb where Jesus was buried was found empty, and they almost challenge people to go check it out for themselves. They basically say, go to Jerusalem and see for yourself. This is completely different from the tombs of other important religious figures, which are well known and visited by many.
They bring up Buddha as an example, pointing out that he was cremated in India centuries ago. This highlights how unique the resurrection claim is when you look at it in the context of religious history.
The idea of resurrection really is unique. It's not about his teachings surviving or his influence continuing. It's a claim that he literally, physically conquered death, exactly as he said he would. So when you take all these unique claims together, it leads to a fundamental question that the sources address. If Jesus claimed to be God, what are the possible explanations?
Right. The sources lay out a very clear and logical framework. Either his claim to be God was true or it was false. And if it was false, they suggest two possibilities. Either he knew he was lying, or he genuinely believed it but was mistaken.
Yeah, let's break those down a bit. If Jesus knew he was lying about being God, the sources argue that this leads to some pretty serious conclusions. He would be a deliberate liar, a hypocrite on a grand scale, someone who's completely opposed to the truth. But the sources also emphasize that there's no sign of selfish ambition or motivation in Jesus' life.
Right.
People often lie for personal gain, for power or status. But why would someone lie about being divine and then willingly suffer and die for that lie? It's a tough question to answer.
Yeah, and the other possibility, if his claims were false, is that he truly believed he was God, even though he wasn't. The sources suggest that, in modern terms, we might think of him as suffering from some kind of mental instability, a delusion. He might even be considered a lunatic.
But then they counter that by pointing to the incredible balance, humility, and selflessness we see in Jesus' character and actions.
Right.
They argue that someone with the kind of delusions of grandeur that come with claiming to be God would likely show other signs of mental instability, like paranoia, erratic behavior, or a self-serving attitude.
Right.
But Jesus was known for his compassion, his willingness to serve others. Remember him washing the feet of his disciples, and he had a consistent moral clarity. So the lunatic explanation doesn't seem very likely, according to these sources.
So, after going through all these possibilities, your sources reach a very specific and powerful conclusion.
Yes. Based on the evidence and logic presented in the material you shared, the only explanation that really accounts for all the claims and the character of Jesus is that he was and is Lord, just like he said.
This brings us to the question, was he just a man? The sources give a very clear answer to this.
They flat out state that a regular human being who made the kind of claims Jesus made, claiming to be God, sinless, the ultimate authority, that person couldn't just be considered a good moral teacher. The sources say such a person would have to be one of the three options we talked about: a liar, a lunatic, or something even worse. They make a striking comparison, saying it's like a human claiming to be a poached egg. It just doesn't make sense. It's completely out of touch with reality.
That analogy really hits home, doesn't it? It shows how radical Jesus's claims were and why the sources are so adamant that we can't just see him as a wise teacher or prophet and ignore his claims of divinity.
Right. And this leads us to a crucial choice, as laid out in your sources.
The choice is stark and unavoidable. Either we reject him as someone fundamentally wrong in his claims, a fool or something worse, or we accept the evidence and, as a result, fall down and worship him as Lord and God. It seems like there's no easy middle ground here.
The material really emphasizes that Jesus, through his claims and his life, didn't give us the option of just seeing him as a good teacher. He presented himself in a way that demands a much deeper response, a complete acceptance or a complete rejection.
And if these incredible claims about Jesus being God are true, then your sources say there's one thing that becomes incredibly important: having a personal relationship with him.
If he is who he claimed to be, then connecting with him on a real and meaningful level becomes the most logical and, I'd say, the most vital response we can have.
And your sources even offer guidance on how to start that relationship. It's beautifully summed up in the section titled, "This is How."
Yes, there are a few key passages in the Bible highlighted here. John 3:16-17 is essential. For God loved the world so much that he gave his one and only Son, so that everyone who believes in him will not perish but have eternal life. For God sent his Son into the world not to judge the world, but to save the world through him. This gets to the heart of God's motivation and the reason Jesus came.
We also have Ephesians 2:8-10. God saved you by his grace when you believed. And you can't take credit for this. It is a gift from God. Salvation is not a reward for the good things we have done, so none of us can boast about it. For we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do the good things he planned for us long ago. This emphasizes the role of grace and faith in building that relationship.
And finally, Romans 10:9-14 lays out a clear path. For it is by believing in your heart that you are made right with God, and it is by confessing with your mouth that you are saved. As the scriptures tell us, anyone who trusts in him will never be disgraced. Jew and Gentile are the same in this respect. They have the same Lord who gives generously to all who call on him. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. But how can they call on him to save them unless they believe in him? And how can they believe in him if they have never heard about him? And how can they hear about him unless someone tells them? This highlights the importance of believing, confessing, and sharing this message with others.
So we've reached the end of this deep dive into your sources. What stands out to you the most? What are the key takeaways that really resonate with you? And what do you think the implications are for you personally as you think about all this? It's definitely a lot to consider.
It really is. The consistency of these claims, the historical context, and the logic behind Jesus' identity, it all calls for continued thought and exploration. For those who want to delve even deeper, really explore these topics in more depth, there are a ton of great resources available at Tyrannis Hall Bible College. THBC. Their website is https://kk2020.storeshop, Tyrannus Hall Bible College. They have a wealth of materials that can be super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Tyrannus Hall Bible College has so much to offer if you're looking to understand these questions and explore the historical and theological background even more. You can find them at https://kk2020.storeshop, Tyrannus Hall Bible College.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive on the Remenify Coaching Program podcast.
It's been a great discussion. Thanks for listening to the Remenify Coaching Program podcast.